We'll jump in then to A Quiet Place Part 2. Now in theaters, will be on Paramount Plus. About 40 days now, I think is the count. Probably in the beginning of July, it'll be on Paramount Plus. But again, this is the sequel. We should have got it last year, truthfully. We should have had it last March. But it was worth the wait and worthy of the prolonged hype, in my opinion. This is, in my opinion, about as good as a horror sequel can get. I would make the argument that this movie does have a lot of thriller tendencies, but I would say this is also a horror movie too. Some people consider this, I don't want to get into a semantics argument. Some people consider this movie science fiction. I don't consider it science fiction because we don't learn much about the monsters in this movie or the other one. They're very basic. It's not about the monsters so much as it is about the act of survival. And this movie part 2 picks up pretty much where part 1 leaves off. Like right as Emily Blunt cocks the gun after it is discovered that the monsters can be defeated or at least disarmed with high-pitched frequencies. This is a louder sequel than the original movie for sure. There's not as much ASL in this movie. There's not as much sign language, mainly because the three surviving leads split up. You have Emily Blunt, Noah Jupe, and Millicent Simmonds kind of going their separate ways. There's essentially 3 narrative threads in this movie. There's Reagan, the daughter, trying to find the source of a radio tower where this song Beyond the Sea is playing. You have the son, whose name escapes me at the moment, Noah Jupe, or Marcus, who, oh my God, and probably the most upsetting scene of the whole damn movie, gets his leg caught in a bear trap.
Dude.
It's funny. I saw an article too. Krasinski wrote that scene specifically to unnerve Emily Blunt because Krasinski and Blunt are married. They're husband and wife.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you knew that or not, but he wrote that Emily Blunt's worst thing is that she hates the most are kids in distress, and he wrote that in the movie just to get under her skin.
Man, I gotta say too, like being back in the theater when that bear trap closed on that kid's leg, hearing a whole audience go, "Oh!" I was like, "Ooh, it's good to be back."
Oh, I did. No, I did. I was an audible gasp there because I hate those things. I hate coming from somebody who's watched all 9 Saw movies, but that scene was upsetting. But anyway, so the 3 storylines, here's what I'm getting at. Reagan's going to find this radio tower to try to figure out where the signal's coming from to see if she can emit the sound from her hearing aid in order to disarm the monsters. Marcus is stuck with the baby because his leg is now broken and it's going to need medical attention. And then the mom has to go look for supplies. So there's kind of 3 sort of adjoining storylines here. But which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but Krasinski has a lot going on here, and he manages it really well. I don't think any narrative feels underdeveloped. I don't think any character feels sort of shortchanged in any way. There's a lot to really like about this sequel. It's not flawless. Neither was the first one, but it's about as good as it can be. I would say if I had one major complaint with it, though, is that there's not as much ASL in this movie, which I think was a really big part of the identity of the first movie. And it's really because Reagan is separated on her own. Now she's with somebody who doesn't speak ASL. So she has to whisper her dialogue and stuff, which she didn't do in the first movie. So this movie kind of bends its rules and sacrifices a little bit of eloquence for narrative convenience. But I also think that's part of what happens when you get a movie that shocks us and surprises us and becomes a huge hit, like A Quiet Place Part 1 did. And it was well, shit, now we got to make a sequel. Now we got to figure out where to take this. And all intents and purposes, I think it was great. And there's one thing I'll talk about later on about Krasinski's directing that I really liked. We'll probably have time for one of you guys to speak before the Zoom-sponsored intermission. So I'll throw it over to Joe. Your thoughts on A Quiet Place Part 2.
I'm right there. I mean, I think Dom kind of hinted that he also enjoyed it during his wrap-up of his first Part 1's review. But I'm right there with you guys, man. I had a blast watching this movie. This was a treat to be the first real big movie to go back to with a group of friends, with a sold-out audience. Yeah, I mean, there was spacing in between people, 2 seats per group or 2 seats per, person, that the theater did. But it was great that it was a movie of this quality, man. And while Steve is talking about how, like, yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on in this movie, there really isn't, but it feels like a lot because Krasinski doesn't waste time with this movie. Just like the first one, this is a tight movie. It's over before you know it. It's only an hour and 40 minutes, just like the first one was. That movie ended that movie was over before you know it, but like the entire time, I remember just gripping my chair, being tense the entire time. And it's the same thing with this one. The moment this movie starts, this movie has one of the best openings I've seen to like a sequel in a long time. We really got to see the whole like what was day one like, which I remember like tons of people I talked to about this movie was like, man, so what was it like that first day where everybody's making noise and these things show up? And it is a very intense opening. It's shot well. It has a really cool transition into where that first one left off. I was like, oh man, Krasinski right off the bat, you're killing it. And then the rest of the movie plays out, and it's just as tense. I really did like and I'm glad Dom also made the comparison to The Last of Us, but The Last of Us storyline that we basically got with Emmett and Reagan, where basically they go on their own to try and find a way to, cure this world of these monsters. And it very much reminded me of that game as well, but it still did its own thing. And I do kind of agree with Steve that, like, yeah, it does suck that we didn't get as much sign language in this movie. But I will say this. This was my biggest worry about a sequel to this movie. I was like, okay, now that like they can make as much noise as they want because they have a device that can kill the monsters. They found out like high frequency of sound opens their ears up, and then you can just shoot them from there. I was worried. Is there gonna just be a ton of talking now? At the very least, in this sequel, yeah, there's not as much sign language, but there also isn't that much talking as I thought there was going to be. I thought there was going to be tons of it in this movie. No, it still remains quiet because, like, despite the fact that, like, yeah, you could talk now, it's still not a good idea to do it. Like, you should.
It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee either. That, like, you want to conserve your artillery, your itinerary and your bullets.
You still got to worry about ammo, and you still have to worry about, well, if you miss that first shot, which we kind of do see in this movie. If you miss that first shot, you're kind of screwed. But yeah, I really did enjoy this. And one thing I did enjoy about this movie a ton, and I thought it was a cool direction to take for a sequel for this in terms of writing, is that the first one, while it does focus on the family, and the second one does too, and it has this whole family aspect, the main characters I would say are Lee and Evelyn, the parents of the family, played by Emily Blunt and John Krasinski. In this sequel, I really did like that more of the focus is on the kids this time around. Yeah, it is about the family and Emmett as well. But I would say that this is more of Reagan's and Marcus's storyline compared to it being Emmett's and Evelyn's, or even Lee's for that matter, for the short time that he does appear on screen during the opening of the film. And I really thought, like, in terms of, like, okay, what can I do with these characters for storytelling purposes and also a little bit of character development? Maybe just changing the focus of them is actually a good way to make me go, oh wow, like it was cool to see Marcus, kind of like, face his fears and everything. And Reagan tried to live up to what her dad was doing in that first one, which was trying to find survivors, trying to find a way to combat these things. And she wants to keep that memory going of him and that fight that he was doing going. And I was like, that was actually really smart. And like, probably, as Steve was saying, the best thing you could do for a sequel like this, in terms of like horror movie sequels or action sequels. Before we take the intermission, this is the last thing I will say. I've been telling people this the entire weekend to go see it, and the best comparison I made is Quiet Place 1 is like Alien. This is very much what Aliens is, basically. It's a lot more action this time around and thrills, but it still is very good.